welcome to the Third Pint Theory podcast. You're with your Kia ora, Martin Bridges. You're with the usual suspects, myself, Michael Donaldson, and Martin, the beer bigwig Bridges. Hey, Martin, you're looking remarkably fresh and sprightly on the video, despite a week of beer in Auckland. You've just finished Auckland Beer Week. How did it go?
It was it was awesome. It was I would put it up there with the best of the 10 Auckland Beer Weeks that there have been. I think I counted 8 events, I think, over the course of the week. I had a couple of days off when I was doing other things, but I think it was great. There were good crowds at various events. A couple of the ticketed events sold out. I believe the Karamu Barrelworks tasting, 16 tons, sold out, and until the Garage Project special funky wild tasting sold out as well. I think it was a great event. I'm already working on with Marie on next year's program.
Oh, very good. Was there a personal highlight? Was there one event that stood out?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I thought it was really interesting. I always like new venues, as I've mentioned before. I always like to get to somewhere new, and I went to Curio, which is a kind of a cocktail bar owned by the people who own Culprit Restaurant, and they did a beer cocktails event with McLeod's. They had a couple of McLeod's beers on tap, and they also did some, I think, 3 beer cocktails. So that was interesting.
Yeah. And the other big news of the week, of the past week, I think, was the West Coast IPA Challenge at the Malthouse, and won by Neck of the Woods, subject of one of these podcasts. Very good episode, if I remember correctly, in which, I don't know, did you drink a MILF at when you were at Neck?
Careful what you're saying.
A MILF. It's Man, I Love Flamingos. You know that.
Yes. I did. It was the particular one I drank was a hazy one.
Okay.
Whereas the one that won was a West Coast. Yeah. But yeah, it's Man, I Love Flamingos is a series, I guess, now from Neck of the Woods, named after their one of their owners, Virgil's love of flamingos.
And this one's it's called Kinky MILF, and I haven't had it because I think very hard to find in the wild. I do know from speaking to Scott Taylor at Neck of the Woods that there will be some on at the Havana. They are literally, they've got a Fort Knox around the remaining kegs, because of course demand goes through the roof when you win something like that. But they're trying to ring fence some to have them available for the Havana, which is great. And of course, Scott will be joining us for one of our live Q&A events at the Havana. We've got him, and this is just one of the many that we'll have, but he's coming alongside Jared Proudfoot from Bonnie Day down in Geraldine, both breweries that are less than 1 year old, both first time at the Havana, and Scott has promised that we will get to taste some kinky MILF. So.
And maybe some beer as well. Yes, I think it was awesome. What a year! What a first year Neck of the Woods have had. Obviously, kicked off with a visit from me to record a podcast at their venue, but then onwards and upwards from that, champion micro brewery at the New Zealand Beer Awards, a bunch of great awards there, and now the Golden Gumboots from the Malthouse West Coast IPA Challenge.
Yeah, no, and there's some amazing photos doing the rounds on social media from Jed, who's just taking some great photos at the moment. And the three of them, Virgil, Scott, and the brewer Reed Liddington, sort of celebrating on the bar. They're fantastic pictures, and they kind of capture what it means to win an event like this. And I think it probably meant more to him in some ways than winning that champion microbrewery title. Just
it's very competitive.
Yeah.
You know, everybody wants to win the Malthouse West Coast IPA Challenge. You know, because it's a single style, and it's you get and it's such a popular style, and I think everybody wants to win it. There were some and some big names that they beat. You know, Garage Project took second, I think. I've had that beer. It was an awesome West Coast IPA. And
then Epic, was it? Standing
Epic in third. I've got that in the fridge. I haven't had it yet. And I think McLeod's in fourth. Which I've had that. And that is also a really good West Coast IPA. So for Neck of the Woods to top those heavy hitters.
Well, those are the three, those Garage Project, Epic, and McLeod's. Like, if you wanted to say, show me a brewery that makes really good West Coast IPA, they would be among the first that you would trot off if you're counting them down. So, it sounds like it's a magical beer and can't wait to try it. Been a huge year for Neck of the Woods because they won People's Choice Awards at both Lagerfest and Smith's NZ IPA Challenge as well. But as Scott said, that's a hearts and minds thing, and getting people to judge your beer as the best is a whole different kettle of fish.
Brewers in New Zealand always refer to the People's Choice Award as the Scott Taylor Award. Because he always seems to, like when he was at Deep Creek, he always seems to take those out. So he's a popular guy. He's a lovely fellow.
It's just such a good story for them, and so good for Reed, the brewer, who'd left Good George to move into the Bay of Plenty region with his young family, and may not have been back in brewing if Neck of the Woods hadn't come along, and if Scott Taylor hadn't asked Brian Watson at Good George, do you know any brewers? And he said, look, there's a guy just around the corner from you. And just nice little coincidence. And I think Scott was saying that at the New Zealand Beer Awards, there was a sort of a table of the various Waikato Bay of Plenty crowd, and Brian was sitting between Scott and Reed on the night. So that was he said it was just quite a nice come full circle, the man who introduced the two of them. So some good work going on down there for sure. Now we've got I think this is an episode that coming up, our guest, Stu McKinlay from Yeastie Boys. I think this is an episode that I think it's just a really useful one for anyone in the New Zealand beer scene to listen to, because Stu has been through so many, I want to say, iterations of the industry almost, seen so many facets of it, from being the first craft brewery, I think they were the first to do the crowdfunding, really early adopters of that model, probably closely followed by Renaissance, I think, who weren't too far behind them.
Renaissance may have been in first. I'm not sure. It was. They're around the same time, but certainly the most noticeable, the first kind of really to make impact.
Yeah. And I think we both have to make a full disclosure here that I am a shareholder in Yeastie Boys SAU, I believe.
I am. I partook in that initial
in the fervour
crowdfunding.
Yeah,
I was in Golding's Free Dive in Wellington while Stu was pressing the button on the laptop to start the crowdfunding.
Yeah, I mean, it's
sold out in half an hour.
Yeah, 30 minutes to raise $500,000. I mean, things were really different then. And there was a real feverish kind of experience around it. I can't even remember how much money I put in, but it was just, you felt like you had to be part of this moment. And, no disrespect to Yeastie Boys or anything, but I don't think I'm going to see my money. I think I've gifted it, but that's all right. I'm happy to gift it. It's just one.
No, it was a really good interview. It's I think people who have recently come into the New Zealand beer scene, probably like in the last 5 or 10 years, probably don't really have any real view of the importance of Stu in those early days. His kind of pioneering, really, of the contract brewing model, the crowdfunding. It actually, even like him being on the board of the Brewers Guild when he wasn't even a brewer, he has had a major impact on the trajectory of craft beer in New Zealand.
And just like, there is a lot of experimental brewing, or kind of, I don't know, call it weird brewing or whatever, but people pushing boundaries. But Yeastie Boys were pushing boundaries way before anyone even thought how to find the boundary, if you know what I mean. Like, there was nothing like Rex Attitude when it came out, that 100% peated malt, which was just ridiculous. Even at the other end, their hoppy porter, pot kettle black, was quite definitive in its time. And now we're used to hoppy dark beers, but it was...
You didn't that, and you certainly wouldn't launch your brand on the back of a hoppy dark bin, would you?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, Emerson's launched on a porter, so maybe maybe they were ripping off that a little bit. But yeah, like there were the collabs with certainly there were winemakers in Australia that they worked with. They were doing all sorts of kind of odd, interesting, intriguing things, sort of, I'm not saying well before anyone else, but quite early on, they didn't settle on just doing straight down the line, basically. And I think they were really influential in the whole Wellington beer scene. When I say they, it's really Stu and Sam to an extent, but Stu was the driving force, the face of it, the brewer. So it's I think, and just the way he's then moved through the industry and different, I don't know, the fact that he's now in Britain importing Garage Project beers is kind of like this, how did you end up there kind of thing. And yeah, so it's a good listen, and I think people will enjoy it. And there are little bits of gold in there, Martin. I think.
Absolutely.
We've got no spoilers.
Real nuggets, isn't there?
Yeah, we'll talk about them at the other end. You have to listen to get them. So, yeah. So why don't we cross to you crossing to the other side of the world and talking to Stu McKinlay, who had to get up early or stay up late. I think you were up late.
He was up reasonably early, and I was up moderately late.
Yeah, time differences. Anyway, here's Martin with Stu McKinlay.
Kia ora, Stu.
Kia ora. Good to speak to you, yeah. It's been too long between drinks for us.
It has been a while, hey. It is. I really appreciate you taking the time on a summer's morning in the UK to have a chat with us. So, for those out there who don't necessarily know who you are, please explain, Stu McKinlay. What is your background in the New Zealand beer industry?
Yeah, it's a funny old thing, kind of explaining who I am now, because I feel like 20 years ago, probably everyone in the New Zealand beer scene knew me, but I've been gone a while now. So yeah, I founded Yeastie Boys back in 2008, and that's probably the thing that I'm kind of most well known for there. But as you know, like I was involved in a lot of other things behind the scenes. So running the New Zealand Beer Awards. So before that, helping start the Society of Beer Advocates, SOBA, which is very dear to your heart as well, and probably a fair few of your listeners. I was co-opted onto the board of the New Zealand Brewers Guild before I was even professionally involved in brewing as well. So I sat on the executive committee there for about 18 months or 2 years back in the sort of days before starting Yeastie Boys. And I think that was possibly just because they knew I would do a lot of work for free. That's basically the top volunteer. But that was very integral to my kind of like journey into the beer world. So so as I say, sort of involved in all sorts of groups and just everything I could to sort of get better beer into the public sort of limelight a little bit. Became friends with a lot of really great brewers and pub owners and things during those years, and slowly sort of got myself to the point where I'd decided to start Yeastie Boys. I also owned Liberty Brewing before then as well, which was a homebrew business. As you well know, homebrew business for a few years, sold that to Joseph Wood and Christina, his wife, who went on to turn it into something very, very special, obviously. And I think in the end, they sold the home brewing business on to someone else at some point as well, for similar reasons, just because they got too busy, but they kept the Liberty name. And so I like to think I have a tiny little part in that space as well. So yeah, it was a super interesting time in beer back there in the early 2000s. Something obviously, as I say, started Yeastie Boys in 2008 with my good old friend Sam Pozaneski, and then we sort of kicked off and made a few beers that became very, very popular for one reason or another, and then ended up moving the business here in 2015. To the UK, started brewing about 6 months after we arrived, and then the rest is sort of history in that regard.
Yeah, that's a pretty quick canter through a large and impactful time in the New Zealand beer industry. So I'm going to pick up on a couple of little nuggets within there. I guess is the SOBA, the Society of Beer Advocates, the founding of SOBA. And we talked on the podcast recently to Greg McGill and about the origins of SOBA, and he was at that fateful meeting at the Malthouse, which it seems a lot of people were at.
Yeah, it's one of those things sort of. It's like the first Sex Pistols gig, everyone says they were there, but really there were only, I don't know, probably a dozen of us, maybe, something like that, I think. And, we all came off the back of the sort of the Real Beer Forum, pretty much, which was a very, very strong community back in those days. A lot of people who have gone on to become kind of like, some of the most well-known brewers in the country, sort of all met during that time on that space. And obviously we were at the old Malthouse on Willis Street, which is very integral venue in my kind of like, development of drinking beer, and understanding, that difference between truly amazing beer and stuff which is, fine to drink, when I have to, but I don't sort of seek out so much, I guess. It was probably in the last sort of days of that venue. I imagine there was probably only another year or so before they moved on to Courtney Place from there.
And now they're back pretty much across the road from where they were before.
But I mean, Greg was obviously very integral. I think he was the first president of SOBA from memory. I can't quite remember. I was treasurer for a while. And I don't remember exactly who was at that first meeting, but I could probably remember maybe half a dozen people off the top of my head. I think you were there, weren't you?
I was not.
Oh, you're not there? No.
No, I popped up later on. It was just, I think it was not long before I arrived in New Zealand, actually. I may not have been in the country at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember kind of arriving and getting involved in the Real Beer Forum, which, was being run by Luke Nicholas of Epic, And I remember...
so meeting Greg, myself, Brendan McKenzie, maybe Rob Owen.
Yeah.
I can't really remember, off the top of my head, but I say, as I say, it was like a really tiny little beer culture at that point. Felt like we kind of all knew each other. And I think I've said to a few people, the first year or so of Yeastie Boys, I felt like every single person who drank our beer, I knew them personally. It was a very, very small scene and quite different from what it is now.
Yeah, I think so. Because I remember that Real Beer Forum, and I remember because I was homebrewing at the time, and getting into case swaps where we'd send bottles of beer around the country, and I remember swapping beers with what turned out to be some of the New Zealand craft beer royalty, yourself, people like Mike Nielsen, who then founded Panhead, now at Boneface, Joe from Liberty, and various other peoples, and they all went on and formed highly successful breweries, and I didn't.
You're probably the smart one, yeah.
I just talk about it.
Yeah, there's like loads of people there. I mean, I think that probably half the people in those case swaps went on some way to have a kind of like professional involvement in beer, either for a short term or a longer term, or sort of dabbled in it. There was obviously a few other people that started sort of contract brewing type businesses like myself. I can't remember if Dale Cooper was involved in that, but he was definitely involved in that sort of Real Beer group and everything. And so it was certainly an interesting time. And even back before that Real Beer group, there was a Yahoo forum, which would have been like very early 2000s or maybe late 90s even. And that's where I met quite a few of the people. I mean, the real standout from that Yahoo forum days, I think Greg McGill was on there and Kieran Hazlitt-Moore from North End. So, I mean, it was probably on dial-up internet when I first started meeting all these guys, yeah.
So what out of all that led to Yeastie Boys?
Yeah, so I was early 2000s, I sort of like had an idea of wanting to do something that wasn't based in an office for the rest of my life. And I really enjoyed my job, but I just sort of didn't feel like it was quite where I fit. So I thought of all sorts of things, and food or drink kind of like became quite a center point of kind of like my thinking. And I toyed with the idea of becoming a chef, but I really didn't want to work when everyone else was having fun. So I started to sort of think about some other ideas around that. And I'd sort of just started to really get into like interesting beer. I'd always been like a little bit of a on a sort of a search for decent beer in some way. And I think that comes down to my family, Scottish parents. Edinburgh was kind of like one of the leading, like, you know, beer producing cities in the world when my parents left Scotland. And my dad was always really interested in like new sort of brewery or brew pub ventures when they started off. So we always had some kind of interesting beer around the house in some kind of way. So through my teens, I sort of grew up into that space. And then you get to the point where you sort of go off to uni and your dad's not buying you the expensive beer. So you're just buying kind of like, you know, whatever you can kind of get your hands on and afford. But even at that stage, I was still looking for something that was a little bit different wherever I could. And yeah, the journey sort of led its way slowly towards brewing. I started home brewing a little bit. Then I was fortunate enough to sort of fall into a group of individuals who kind of like were fairly well connected in the beer scene. And Neil Miller is probably absolutely integral to kind of like where my journey ended up going. He invited me to come and help out at the New Zealand Beer Awards, or the Brew NZ Beer Awards, I think they were probably called back then. It was before it became the Brewers Guild of New Zealand Beer Awards, or the Begonzas.
Begonzas.
Yeah. So I used to go to a monthly tasting with Neil Miller at the Thistle Inn in Wellington, upstairs there, and it was a fantastic sort of space, big crowds, really, really, brilliant. Neil took us through all sorts of interesting beers, and there was all sorts of people, from people who knew nothing at all about beer to people like myself who were pretty enthusiastic and probably had tried a lot of the beers already before we went there. But it was a social occasion for me with a bunch of friends. We used to go every month, and I got to know Neil through that, and he asked me to come and help out with the beer awards. And I slowly progressed there through steward to chief scorer to head steward after Neil sort of retired. And at that point, it was when I got sort of like asked to sort of sit on the Brewers Guild committee. So I was on there with a bunch of people like David Cryer and Martin Bennett from the Twisted Hop. Colin Page, who was head brewer at Max, was on there for a while. I think Ralph Bungard from Three Boys. So a bunch of like, people who really probably changed Richard Emerson, of course, can't forget Richard. And Ted and Francis, who a lot of people will know as well, both sadly departed. And through that sort of time, I got to know a lot about what was happening in the beer scene, the beer world, and kind of like I could feel that sort of groundswell and excitement of interesting beer growing. But I sort of always felt like there was some other things kind of missing. Probably people just taking a little more risk and interest in, making interesting beers and things like that. During the stewarding time, I got to know Steve Nelly really, really well, who was a fantastic brewer from Invercargill Brewery. And over the years, as his beers got much better and better professionally minded, better and better as a home brewer, I got to the point where I asked him one day if I could brew some beer on his kit. And I'd got to know that he was sort of only using about sort of 30% of his capacity or something like that. So I thought, rather than, going and investing in a brewery and trying to build something myself, why don't we do something together and utilize some of that excess capacity? So we did that. We talked about it a bit, and then I sent him a trial beer of a beer which became known as Pot Kettle Black. And he rang me back a couple of days later and said, I've got a bit of a problem with this beer, Stu. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, there's no way you can brew just 1,200 litres of this. You've got to brew a full batch of 2,400 litres because it's really, really bloody good. And I think we need to make more of this. So we went ahead and did that. I was panicking that I wouldn't be able to, find places for it to sell because there were so few places selling good beer at that stage. But also through the Brewers Guild Awards and the back scene, sort of there, I'd met Craig Bowen, who had started a distribution business called Beer NZ. And when I told Craig what I was doing, he was like, I'll take it all. And he did. He took it all, sold it across New Zealand. I think probably a tiny bit went to Auckland, but the majority went around Christchurch and Wellington. And then that was it. We sort of like came up with this idea, got the recipe, brewed a small version, sent it off to Steve, started the business, at company's website, and it was all up and running from probably about 8 weeks from genesis of the idea really to actually make it happen.
Yeah, and those were awesome days. I think that I remember something occurred to me the other day when we were about the Invercargill brewery, the contract brewing there. In that when we were getting ready for having this chat, I pulled a bottle out of my cellar, a dusty bottle from the back of the cellar, and looked at the label, and then was brewed at Invercargill Brewery, and it was a Yeastie Boys beer brewed as a collaboration. It was Pull You.
Yeah. Fun little time that it was. We did 2 different collaborations with wineries over the years. The first one was with Some Young Punks, who are an Australian winemaking group, and they're sort of like all winemakers in their day jobs, and then have their own sort of business on the side, and their own brand. And we made a series of 3 beers with them years ago, where we got some of their it was a botrytized Viognier, and we turned it into candy sugar, and then made 3 different beers with it, sort of like a strong golden ale, a blonde ale, and a imperial porter kind of thing. So 2 beers around sort of 9-10%, and one about 7%. And then a few years after that, I had a little bit of a relationship with Gladstone Vineyard in the Wairarapa. They were just about 10-15 minutes drive down the road from my dad, so I've been there a few times for lunch and got to meet the owner, Christine. Knew her reasonably well. My parents knew her very well because they were Scottish, and so was she. So she approached me at some stage and sort of just said, "Are you interested in doing some sort of collaboration?" And we talked about this kind of idea. We got her winemaker on board as well, and we did a similar sort of thing. So again, we took a wine of theirs that had been sitting in tank for about a year or something, and we made some candy sugar out of it, made a sort of golden ale, again about sort of 7%, and then got some beautiful labels designed and sold the beer and the wine side by side as Push Me Pull You, the Dr. Dolittle character with the sort of 2-headed llama or alpaca or whatever it is. And again, had a lot of fun with that one. It was we got I got a little bit of the wine over here in the UK, but we obviously imported a bit of the beer. We were importing a fair bit of Yeastie Boys beer from New Zealand at that stage, as well as brewing here. So that was a bit of fun, and I've got probably maybe 2 bottles left myself, so I have to pull one out myself.
Yeah, that was my last one, unfortunately, but it was still tasting really good for about a 9-year-old beer.
Yeah.
Now, I was impressed. It was a great beer. The other bottle that I considered pulling out was another collab that you were involved in. This time, West Moon with Kieran, the aforementioned Kieran Aslamore from North End, and that had a bit of a story behind it as well, I think.
Yeah, that's my favourite collaboration I've ever done, for sure. Kieran, as I say, is an old friend, sort of, I guess, 25, 26 years or so I've known him for now, give or take. And as I say, we met right back in we didn't actually meet in person probably until the Real Beer days, but we met back on like Yahoo forums. Both really interested in home brewing, and just became nice friendship over the years. Kieran came over here just before COVID, actually, about 2019, I think it was. Came over in February, bought a big coat with him. Was really looking forward to winter, and we had like the warmest February ever, and I don't think he wore his coat the whole time he was here. And during that time, he was here for about a month, and he spent about 2 weeks staying with us, and he would stay for a few days, then go off, then come back and stay for a few days and go off again. And he had a wonderful trip, soaking up all of the real ale sort of atmosphere and eating great food and meeting great people, did a couple of collaborations and things. And near the end of his trip, we had a bottle that James Kemp, who was a head brewer at Yeastie Boys at the time, he had sent to us for Kieran and I to drink while Kieran was here. And it was it's about a 40-year-old bottle. I think Kieran wasn't even 40 at that stage, so it was older than him. And it was an old Burton Ale, Jubilee Ale. So it would have been from about, I guess it was like 79 or something like that, 78, 79. I can't remember exactly, but absolutely phenomenal. We didn't know if we were going to pull the cork on it and it was going to be completely spoiled or if it was going to be really great, but it was just absolutely stunning. We had it with some great cheese. Kieran used to be a cheesemonger, so he'd picked up some really nice cheese. And he had also bought a really lovely bottle of sparkling wine from a Kent, a local producer down the road from where Frith and my wife and I were living at that stage. And so we had just this fantastic afternoon. It was like 19 degrees on a February day. You'd expect it to be 9. Maybe even colder. We sat outside and enjoyed that and had a really, really good time. And James, or JK, he had also sent a little vial for us to collect the yeast in, made us promise that as well as drinking and enjoying the beer, we would collect the yeast so that we could, he could play around with it and grow it up, which he went and did. And we ended up using it in a couple of collabs. So one was this West Moon, and we sent another bit of it out to Hong Kong to a brewery there called Young Master that we did a collaboration with as well. But the one with Kieran, we brewed about 6 months later. I came back to New Zealand on a trip for the Yeastie Boys AGM and a bit of work in Australia and New Zealand. Flew straight into Wellington and borrowed my brother's car and drove sort of an hour up the coast to where Kieran's brewery was. He had already mashed in, got this sort of beer already, and this was about probably about 7 or 8 at night I arrived, and we ended up sort of running it off into the kettle, getting the boil going, and then Kieran went off to bed for a few hours and I sat in the brewery by myself, had a couple of pints because they had a bar there as well. Did a few emails and everything and kept an eye on the boil, and we boiled that beer for 12 hours. So it was an all pale malt beer, but it ended up the colour of a, very dark brown porter or something like that. So got some great photos of how the colour changed over the hours from, golden to deep copper to like a really rich ruby colour, then through to the sort of really dark brown in the end, and brought completely different, dark malt characteristics to the beer than what you would normally get from using sort of roasted or toasted malts. Fermented that beer in a standard tank for a while, then put it into barrels with this special yeast from the beer that we had drunk back in the UK 6 months earlier. And that yeast obviously had a bit of sort of wild characteristics in it as well, and left that in those barrels for, I think it was about 6 months. It does say on the side of the bottle. I can't remember off the top of my head. And so it was packaged probably close to a year later, maybe 9 months after we had actually brewed it. And then again, luckily enough, got a bit of that beer to the UK. So I managed to stash a few bottles myself, and I've got a couple of bottles left, I think, of that one. One of which I should probably drink relatively soon, and the other one I might try and save to around its sort of best after date, I think, which we put on it as something like 2063 or something.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those stashed away, and I'll hang on to those. I'm not entirely certain I'll manage to make it to 2063, but not sure if I'll make it to 2063. Yeah. Never mind the beer. So I think the collaboration has always been a big part of the Yeastie Boys story, and one of the other things we mentioned was kind of the contract brewing was a key part. But then the other thing that I always associate with the Yeastie Boys, which then I think has contributed to the growth of the New Zealand beer industry is the crowdfunding, because that was, I don't think any brewery had gone down the crowdfunding route before Yeastie Boys did. What led to that?
Well, Renaissance were the first, I think, to. So I think we were, from memory, I could be wrong, but I think we were the third company in New Zealand to like successfully crowdfund. So a couple of people had tried it, not done it successfully. A couple of businesses had done it before us, and I think Renaissance was one of them. I'm pretty sure, yeah. But yeah, we were as I say, we were the third, but we were probably the first really big news story, because we kicked off at, I don't know, 6 p.m. on a Monday afternoon or something, or Monday evening, and it was all done and dusted by 6:33. So we raised $500,000 in 33 minutes, which was quite a big news story, given it was the first sort of couple of months of the crowdfunding days, and that was really just off the back of it had been, Yeastie Boys was a part-time project for many years, and I was working in either full-time or part-time work during all of that time, and I sort of got to the point where I sort of felt like I needed to go one way or the other. So either make it definitely a sideline thing and not spend so much time on it, because I had a young family at this stage as well, so trying to work 12, 14-hour days when you're trying to keep on top of absolutely everything was really, really difficult. So I had done a few kind of like things with the likes of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and everything about different ways to, fund your growth of your business and that kind of thing. And during this time, I had met Anna Gunther, that was CEO of the founder and CEO of Pledge Me, still is, and just absolutely gelled with her on this sort of the idea of using our community to fund the business, an extension of sort of like I saw it as a bridge between kind of traditional funding at both ends of the model, which was the friends and family kind of thing at the very sort of basic level, through to professional or semi-professional investors at the other end, and that's exactly kind of who we ended up with as our sort of funding in the end. When I look back through kind of all the people who have bought in, we probably had about half of the money was funded by people who I would have considered, investing for a return, and half are investing for kind of like, passion project, friends, kind of thing. And obviously, everyone wants a return in some way. That's the ultimate goal. But I think there was a lot of love for what we were doing in the beer market. I think that was, behind that, a lot of that funding.
And since then, kind of, as you say, I think that you're right that you weren't the first, but you were the first high profile, and that then there was a whole series of crowdfunding for breweries. Some more successful than others, but and it still continues. Obviously, Three Sisters at the moment have a crowdfunding round open related to their purchase of Sunshine Brewing. So it continues, but I think that a lot of people would point to Yeastie Boys as the trigger for a lot of that. So that led to the expansion to the UK.
Yeah.
How did that play out?
Yeah, so that was the whole sort of impetus behind the sort of direction of the business, I guess, at that stage. So that sort of goes back to sort of late 2013. We got invited to the UK to brew at one of the Wetherspoons International festivals. So they approach probably about a dozen brewers every year from around the world to come over here, collaborate with a local brewery, and it goes into sort of 1,000 pubs. So significant volume of beer. And it's funny, I got a message sort of overnight, woke up one morning to this message from kind of like just a Gmail address, and it was sort of written kind of weirdly, and I thought, I don't know if this is true or anything, but I did a quick little Google and then asked around a couple of people, and they were like, I knew people who had done it, and I said, does this person exist, and is it is this for real? And it seemed that it was. So I went back and said, hey, look, I'm really interested in this offer, because they basically they pay you money to fly over there and everything, and you can obviously get to brew with some really amazing traditional UK brewers, and have a decent time while you're here. They look after you reasonably well. Like the brewery who you hosted with generally looks after you really, really well, and also the people running the whole kind of like beer festival do as well. So I kind of replied and said yes, but I said that I really wanted to brew with Adnams, who were a brewery I really, really loved and respected, really loved their beers, and had noticed that they had done a couple of these Wetherspoons collabs in the past. They immediately came back and said, yeah, look, we'll ask them, and if they're keen, that'll be great. So that happened really quickly, that they said, yes, you can definitely do that. And we started talking with Fergus Fitzgerald, the head brewer at Adnams, about what to brew. We ended up brewing Gunnamatta, our Earl Grey IPA, which was pretty amazing. We made more in that batch than we have made in the last sort of 2.5 years of making that beer in New Zealand and selling across New Zealand and Australia. So it was a pretty interesting sort of time in that regard. And that also triggered at the same time an idea of that perhaps we could brew our beer in the UK longer term. We'd been asked to export there a few times. A couple of different people had asked us, and we'd sort of never really taken the bite, possibly because it's a lot of work to sort of fill a container for overseas, a 40-foot container, when it's your part-time gig and you've got a day job as well, and partly because we kind of knew that all that work would go down probably as a one-off, because we would send it over there, people would tick some boxes and say they've tried Yeastie Boys beer, and then that probably it wouldn't really lead to anything sustainable. So we used that trip to come and brew with Adnams, and then also pop around the country a little bit and visit a couple of places that we could potentially brew with longer term. And funnily enough, James Kemp, who I mentioned earlier, JK, he sort of helped us out on that journey. At that stage, he was working for a homebrew business, but he had been at Thornbridge and Buxton Brewery before then, so he was very well known. And I had known him from his days in New Zealand, where he won champion New Zealand homebrewer at the SOBA Homebrew Awards. And he had also worked in government in Wellington, which I did as well. So we kind of like, we could go out and chat about fermentation and government policy from time to time. I was at the Ministry of Health and he was at MAF, I think, at the time. So we both worked on the terrace, but barely saw each other outside of the odd visit to a place to try some decent beer. Yeah.
Excellent. So obviously there was a huge move. You relocating to the UK and kind of the core of the Yeastie Boys business moving to UK, and you kind of then, I guess, fairly soon after switch to the kind of the brew under license model here in New Zealand.
The initial sort of idea was to come and be here for 6 months, get it all set up, and kind of move back. And then I was thinking that I'll probably be coming over, 2 to 4 times a year, depending on how things were going. But very soon after arriving here, we kind of worked out that we had to deal with some people here to do the sort of national distribution. And I fairly quickly worked out that that wasn't really going to work. They would have been really great if we were already a sort of well-established, recognised brand with lots of money to like throw into the market. But, because distribution-wise, they were great. But they didn't have the sort of capacity to grow a brand. So we decided that we'd stay here longer term and sort of do all the growth side of things, and then work with sort of wholesalers and everything nationally here as well. So we hired a manager and a sales manager, like a general manager and sales manager back in New Zealand, to sort of run things for us. And we ran it that way for 2 or 3 years. And then we got to the point where, probably 3 years, then we got to the point where it sort of became a bit hard to manage because we were growing, pretty quick here in the UK. We had limited resources and limited sort of staff on the ground. And me trying to juggle time between New Zealand and the UK was a bit difficult. So we had been doing some contract brewing at Urbanort in Auckland at that stage, and so we asked them if they'd be interested in like doing a brew under license model, so they could manage the sales and distribution and everything as well. And we went ahead and did that, and that was really good for a couple of years until they sort of really kicked off themselves, and their brand became big, and they just filled their brewery with their own stuff, and it was then difficult for them because they were having to fill their tanks to sort of like meet the model that they had with us, or the agreement they had with us. They were having to fill the tanks with our beer, when obviously they could make more money off and grow their brand themselves with their own beer, and they didn't have a lot of space to expand tank wise or anything like that. So they had been doing some work with Morning Cider Company, who had a bar just sort of down the road from them, and they had been fermenting their cider for them. And they put us in touch with them to take over the license model, essentially. And we ran that they took over sometime after sort of COVID. I can't remember exactly, maybe sometime in 2020. And they ran that for 4 or 5 years up until just recently. Actually, we've just stopped brewing recently with them. I think they've probably sold through pretty much all of their stock now. They might have a little bit left. But as of sometime fairly soon, there probably won't be any Yeastie Boys beer in New Zealand, unless there's someone listening in who wants to drop us a line and take over brewing some nice, interesting heritage brands like Gunnermatter.
I certainly hope that somebody does take it on. So aware of the time that you then, after that massive growth in the UK, the whole market there ran into difficulties probably around about the COVID times and so on, and so therefore kind of the Yeastie Boys UK scaled back quite significantly, and you stepped away from the day-to-day side of that business. What is it that you then have taken on? Because I know that there's then a link back to New Zealand in that as well.
Yeah. So so post-COVID, essentially. Well, pre-COVID, we were selling about probably 85% of our volume in cans and 15% in keg. Now we're about 95% probably in keg, 90% in keg. So that market has switched remarkably. The supermarket sales especially have changed considerably. Pre-COVID was like a real boom time for craft beer, and there was a lot of craft beer in supermarkets, and things were going pretty well, and it was reasonably good margin as well. Obviously, when COVID hit, the multinationals kind of like really, really needed to like fill their volume somewhere. So the pricing started to change considerably, and we were, just to give a little example of kind of like how things have changed. Pre-COVID, we were selling cans of Gunnermatter into supermarkets for £1 each, essentially like 24 pounds a case of 24 for a 330ml. Now they would probably be paying 60 to 70p tops. And during that time, our pricing has increased by about 30% as well. So we're now at the point where we literally could not make beer cheap enough to sell it to a supermarket without losing money. So that's kind of changed fairly considerably. So things took a massive change in regards to like our strategy and everything there. We a little while after COVID, we'd done a couple of rounds of kind of like private investment, and we were looking for an industry kind of investor. So either a brewery or someone with kind of like distribution, kind of like national distribution links and sales teams and stuff like that. And we talked to quite a few people from some of the multinationals through to some quite large, UK based breweries. And we ended up coming across Kingfisher Drinks, which are essentially they were founded by the guy who started Kingfisher in India, the brewery, but completely separate business. Kingfisher is now owned by Heineken, but Kingfisher Drinks here in the UK has the license to brew and sell Kingfisher beer. So they brew and sell about 9 million litres a year, I think, of Kingfisher. Pretty much every curry place in the country has it. Obviously, loads of supermarkets and stuff as well. So their team approached us, and they were interested in bringing a craft beer into their sort of portfolio for national distribution. And after a couple of sort of chats backwards and forwards, they said, "Hey, look, we're really interested in potentially investing as well, so that we don't go through this sort of model that I've gone through with a lot of businesses where they take them on as a kind of part of their portfolio, and then that business grows to a point where they kind of like move on to someone else bigger." Because, Kingfisher Drinks are, at that stage, they were sort of 20 to 30 times the size of Yeastie Boys, I guess, in regards to revenue. But then some of the other players we were talking to were, 100 to 500 times bigger. So, it's a logical step for a lot of people to go, from one place distribution wise and move on to something bigger, especially when you start to look at, groups with the brewery groups with their own pub groups and stuff like that. So, yeah, we went, we had bit of a chat over investment. There was a slight stop-start affair to the whole thing because of sort of little lockdowns and stuff that we kept going into here in the UK. But all said and done in the end, it happened reasonably quickly in regards to, the amount of time we spent working on it and everything. And they invested in us in, I guess it was probably, can't remember off the top of my head, about 2022 in the end, or maybe late 21. And after a few years of kind of running that sort of mixed model where we were selling a little bit of stuff direct and selling stuff, quite a big volume through them, we got to the point where we kind of realized that if we kind of like remove our own costs from the business, so that was our sales manager and myself as kind of managing director, for my wife is kind of like, sort of art director and creative director, then we'd be quite nicely profitable and we wouldn't have to work for it as well. So we're essentially running a brew under license model with them as well, where they were brewing Big Mouth, our biggest selling beer. We would buy that off them and sell it direct ourselves. And then also we were making like 2 or 3 beers ourselves. But we can make those 2 or 3 beers with me just, working less than part-time, just on a sort of hour or 2 a week, very much in a sort of director role rather than a full-time role. And so we went ahead and did that. And after a little while of kind of like wondering what I was going to do, whether I was going to go back into my old job in a suit in an office or something else, I kind of realized that like a lot of my, contacts and potential for work and stuff here really were in the drinks trade. So, so I ended up sort of sticking in that side of business. I did a bit of consulting for a few breweries, anything from sort of one day, helping people out on a board, doing some advisory stuff too, through to like 3 months full time with a brewery, helping them with some sort of strategy stuff. And then during that time, I sort of came up with rebirthed this idea that I had many years before about a sort of distribution cooperative that's funded by the people who are involved in selling rather than a traditional wholesaler where people buy, the beer off the brewery and then sell it through to margin. This is where 100% of the money goes back to the breweries that we're working with, and they fund us. So on the upside of things, they should be making a hell of a lot more money than they would through a wholesaler, and have a lot more visibility in regards to, where the beer goes, what price is being set and all those kind of things, and direct interaction with the people that we're selling to as much as they want. Some people I'm working with are more hands off and some people are more hands on. it's been a really interesting experience, mostly working with British and Irish producers for now, but recently brought in Garage Project. So yeah, that was a sort of long, slow process to get it up and running, but it's been like quite full on for the last 3 or 4 months. Some beer arrived about a month ago, and we've had a really successful launch with them. A lot of interest in stuff, a lot of people kind of buying, repurchasing already. And it's only really been 2 weeks since we launched it. And we've already had quite a few customers coming back to buy some more. So it's exciting to see New Zealand beer in the market here again, because it was a big part of my initial arrival. We were part of this New Zealand beer collective with Renaissance, Three Boys, Tuatara, and Eight Wide. So as well as representing Yeastie Boys here, I was representing New Zealand quite often and, running bars at beer festivals with lots of other New Zealand beer around me. So it's kind of like come full circle back to 2015, what it felt like there for people to be clambering for New Zealand beer. And nice to be working with a brand such as Garage Project, who obviously have just done amazing things over the last sort of 15 years or so that they've been around. Amazing brand, and just a beer, beers that get better and better and better every time I try them. The beers that I've tried that have come over the best I've ever tried, and I felt like that every time I was going back to New Zealand, that each time I went back, the beers were getting better and better. Obviously, they've started the Wild Workshop program, so, there's some really, really exciting stuff coming out of that, but they're, they're classic sort of IPAs and West Coast IPAs and hazies and sort of, clean sours, as I'd call them, like the pickle beers and stuff are really great as well. So it's been...
What was the mix of that first Garage Project shipment that went across the UK recently?
About a 50-50 probably. They've got about, they brought in about 7 or 8 clean beers. So pickles and... they bought some tiny, some hazy, and some couple of DFA and pernicious weed as well. And then there's about sort of 12 or so of the Wild Workshop beers. And overall, the splits, probably maybe not quite 50-50, maybe slightly less Wild Workshop, but quite a lot of the Wild Workshop, and that's really a big impetus behind what they're trying to do, is to get some of that beer out to the rest of the world. So Britain obviously to start, but potentially a little bit into Europe as well. So I'm talking to a couple of venues in Europe. We've also got a little bit has gone up to Norway from the shipment. So yeah, some really, really interesting, exciting beers in that space. And obviously it doesn't hurt at all that they've started to do some really amazing things at the World Beer Cup and the Brussels Beer Challenge and stuff like that. So they've become really well recognised along the likes of your Cantillons and Boone and Fontaine and stuff like that as some of the best sort of spontaneous and mixed ferment sort of beers in the world, which is really, really amazing for a little Wellington brewery.
Yeah, I was talking to Pete Gillespie from Garage Project recently, and we were talking about the shipment and how he really sees it as a key part of growing the Wild Workshop is that export model, partly because they're really excellent beers with a really great reputation, but also they travel really well, and there is a heck of a lot of desire to buy those in the UK. So
I mean, Europe is whatever 400 million people here, as opposed to whatever 5 million in New Zealand. So obviously there is the market there for that kind of thing, and there's it's also reasonably easy to ship a container into the Netherlands and then ship all across Europe from there. You could also almost run a direct to customer from there, but I think the model's changed a lot. There's not so many of the kind of old school importers that there were, craft beer importers that there were pre-COVID, but there's certainly quite a lot of places who are they'll go direct, so we can ship direct pallets out of even the UK. It's a little bit trickier than being inside the EU, but we can send direct pallets into bars all across Europe and everything. And then if it goes well longer term, they could almost be palletized in New Zealand, arrive here and just sort of go directly out, already pre-wrapped and everything. Yeah, so there's huge amount of potential, and I wouldn't say there's a lot of potential for a lot of breweries in New Zealand, but certainly Garage Project, they're consistently up there and invited to all the best festivals in the world, winning awards at the most important places. Brands very, very, very highly respected, and it's been amazing selling it here. How many people have already had posters up in their tap room or at their brewery or something, because so many people here in the UK beer scene seem to have done some time in New Zealand or Australia and kind of like fell in love with craft beer down there, and then come back here to kind of start their business. And a lot of them were inspired by the likes of 8 Wired or Yeastie Boys or Garage Project or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good step for Garage, and I think, as you say, the potential is huge. And just before we wrap up, I just wanted to kind of get a bit of a view as to where is the UK beer market now, because we talked, certainly you've already mentioned, in terms of the shifts in the supermarkets, and the obviously the price pressure and so on. But where do you see kind of the UK beer market being at? Because I remember when I left the UK sort of 2007, and then at that point it was still very much a cask ale driven market, certainly at the boutique craft, whatever you want to call it, end of the market. But that's it. The sense I've had from kind of looking back is that has changed. There's a lot more of the kind of maybe the US styles and so on. Where do you think things are at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's obviously pre-COVID, it was just booming beyond belief. A lot of money was going into building breweries and everything, and there's been a few really high profile and very, very expensive sales. Beavertown, Camden, some of those kind of really early kind of like early ones in, and obviously Lion Nathan came over here and they bought a London brewery called Four Pure and Magic Rock from Huddersfield, who were, two of the sort of like hot breweries of the time as well. That ended up going not very well at all, unfortunately, and those brands have kind of like sort of petered out. They've been through another owner since then, which didn't work out either. They may have even gone through a third. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, that's been a bit sad. And we've seen a lot of that kind of stuff where, there's been a lot of consolidation. So, the very best sold off to multinationals, and a bunch of the other ones in the middle have struggled. We've seen a lot of the ones who were at the kind of like, that sort of like high volume space have gone under. There's been a few that are still hanging on, but I would say that, 3 or 4 years running, probably the largest craft or independent brewery in London either sold or went under, over a period of, 3 or 4 years. It's been quite significant. There's been a few who I'm very surprised are still going. There's been a little bit of that classic sort of race to the bottom in regards to pricing and things like that, which is really, really tricky, and it makes the market hard for everyone. But overall, I would say it's in a pretty good space. The quality of beer is pretty good. The market's obviously matured, so you don't have people chasing, absolutely wild, weird beers all the time now. Like people are really going for quality and breweries who are making really, really solid, pale ales and things like that. Obviously, pricing's a significant factor in that, because everyone in real terms is earning a hell of a lot less than they were pre-COVID as well. So things have tightened up a lot. Like all of my neighbours, went from paying, £1,200 to £1,500 a month in their mortgages to, £500-600 more a month. And that blows your, budget for going out to restaurants and pubs and buying kind of like expensive craft beer and stuff. So it's been very, very tough, but there's a really, really nice underlying bunch of, at least 1,000 amazing little kind of micro pubs and little bottle stores and things who still really, really focus on, independent producers and natural wines and really great craft beers, and are very thoughtful about the things that they buy. So we have, with my new business, Liquid Sky, who I'm working with, Garage Project with, I've got about sort of 700 or 650 kind of like, leads or customers in my kind of list. And I'm finding like pretty much every day I find a new one, and often they've been around for quite a long time. It's just that it's so hard to find them unless you have someone full-time, just basically searching out bottle stores and everything, because they exist all over the country, tiny little villages, they're in the big cities, they're everywhere. And one of the great things about Garage Project is a lot of them have come looking for us because they've heard Garage Project's coming in. A lot of them already follow them online and, Facebook or Instagram or something like that. So a lot of them have come out of the woodwork, but you just get that other thing through, when you're on social media and you follow a lot of pubs and bars and bottle stores and stuff, you obviously see a lot of them come up, as suggested people to follow, and you look at them and think, wow, it's an amazing little place, in the middle of nowhere that I've never even heard of before. And it's, I think it'll always be around. It was not going to be quite like it was pre-COVID, where every sort of corner store in London was being turned into a, craft beer and natural wine bottle store. Where you could sort of drink in, one of the great things here, and you see it a little bit in Australia as well, but not so much in New Zealand, is these tiny little stores with like just a few tables inside. So they're mostly a sort of off license for people to take home, but they create like a little community vibe by just having a space where people can sit in and drink as well. And it seems a bit easier to get licenses for that kind of thing here. And it's quite a wonderful environment. A really great place to go and learn about new beers and breweries and stuff. And there's so many UK producers making really great stuff now, from, again, like US style hoppy beers through to sort of spontaneous to mixed firm stuff as well. All sorts of crazy stuff. There's a brewery here in the UK that specializes in imperial stouts. In fact, it's probably more than one, but there's one that I can think of off the top of my head. There's a few that really specialize in, sour beers as well and stuff as well. So again, it's just a big market. There's opportunities for anyone to build sort of, nice little niche businesses.
Well, look, we could rattle on all night. I'm sure I would love to hear more about what's happening in the UK, and but I'm just going to have to get myself back over there sometime. I haven't been back.
Come and visit, and we can have a few more hours spending talking about it all, and visiting a few great pubs as well.
Yeah, that's. I remember the last time I was there was kind of 2019, just pre-COVID, and you gave me an itinerary of London pubs to work my way around, which I spent a very happy day doing that.
Look, a lot more since then as well. So there's always something new to take to. Quite often very, very old, but new to me. Yeah.
Look, it's been awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time, Stu. I really hope that the Garage Project shipments continue and continue to go well, and I hope that we manage to find somebody here in New Zealand to bring back Kettle Black.
That would be wonderful. Yeah,
I miss that beer. Thank you very much, Stu. You take care.
Big love to all your listeners, and especially those people I know. But I really look forward to hopefully being back at some stage, even if for a short period of time. I'm going to try and tie it in with something beer related, so I can get to catch up with loads and loads of people in one space at one time.
It would be lovely to see you again. Take care, mate.
Cheers. Take care.
Well, Martin, I did say there were some nuggets in there. And one of them that I forgot that I knew was that Stu was the person who started Liberty Home Brewing Supplies, which he sold to Joe Wood and Christina, and which then became Liberty Brewing. So again, Mr. Influence on the New Zealand beer scene, right?
Absolutely. And I'd like you, I'd forgotten that I knew that.
Yeah.
And because I was home brewing around those times, and I bought ingredients from Liberty.
Yes.
And I remember now, Joe and Christina taking that on, and then deciding to make beer, and from there, Liberty grew. And I think the other thing was that I'd also the collabs that the Yeastie Boys Liberty collabs. Remember Never Raven?
Yes.
That was a beautiful beer. I miss Never Raven. But yeah, so as you say, Stu as a kind of a progenitor of a bunch of bits of the New Zealand beer industry, and I think that the collabs have been a key part of that, including the story he told about his collaboration with Kieran Haslettmore then at North End.
Yes.
And that overnight boil of leading to West Moon.
Yeah. That's a huge beer, West Moon, in all descriptions. It's you still have some, do you?
I still have, I think, 2 or 3 bottles tucked away.
Yeah.
It is definitely a beer that is built for age. So I will pluck one of those out of the cellar in maybe a year or 2 and see how it's going.
On that note, this is for further down the line, but there's a little segue as Kieran Haslettmore is lined up to be the next guest on the Third Pint Theory podcast. I'll be calling into his place in Waikanae on my way down to Beervana, and we're going to stop in and have a chat, which I am very much looking forward to. And then, yes, we are going to be at Beervana. So if you're listening, and if you're going to be at Beervana, come along and find us. We'll be hosting live Q&A sessions, both sessions Friday and the first session Saturday. And we've got a number of guests lined up. We touted Neck of the Woods and Bonnie Day. Who else have we got, Martin?
We're going to be talking to the Pink Boots Society.
Yep.
Really looking forward to that one. Also, with a Wellington focus, we'll be talking to Double Vision and Abandoned Brewery, like Double Vision celebrating their 10th birthday. Abandoned, of course, have just sort of taken over Heyday, so that's a really interesting story. We've got Kelly Ryan's coming along to talk hops, which will be interesting, and beer in general. I think that'll be a good one. And we're still working. Oh, the other one we've got is Mount Brewing and... Oh, yes. Sorry? Oh, yes, is what I would say. Yes. Mount Brewing, Niall Harley from Mount Brewing with his Harley Stout, and he's going to be joined by Jesse from Shining Peak, who is, I'm hoping he's going to smuggle in, or will have, some of their vintage stout. So we've got a little bit of a stout focus there. And we're still working on another, I think, special guest, if we can get them over the line, which is One Drop. We're going to be there. We just have some logistical things to try and sort out there. So it'll be great. I'm really looking forward to it. These were, I thought they were really good chats last year, and a good chance to sample some really interesting beers while you listen to people talk about it. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I had a great time doing it last year. We got some some really good chats with some brewers, and we got some really good feedback from people who'd attended the sessions and said they'd learned things, and that they, as you say, got to test some really interesting beers. So if you are coming down to Beervana, please come along and to one of our Q&A sessions and say hello.
Yeah. Say hello. And I think for anyone who went last year, we were sort of in a little bit of a corridor. I think we're going to have a more dedicated space this year, which I'm looking forward to. So,
yeah, apparently we've been upgraded.
Upgraded. It's always good to get an upgrade in life. Hey, Martin, thank you so much for the effort involved in chasing down Stu over in the UK. Really good interview, and see you in Wellington next week.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, people. The Third Pint Theory is recorded, edited, and produced by myself, Michael Donaldson, and Martin Bridges, the Beer Bigwig. You can find past episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcast platforms.
If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And please leave us a comment or rating. It really helps other beer lovers find the show. You can also find us on socials. We're third.pint.theory on Instagram and at thirdpinttheory.bsky.social on Blue Sky.
Don't forget to check out what we're up to outside the podcast. You can read my latest articles, reviews, and news in the Pursuit of Hoppiness magazine at hoppiness.co.nz. Plus, you can sign up to my weekly beer news email, Friday Night Beers, at hoppiness.substack.com.
And if you're a brewery, bar, or restaurant owner looking for help with making the most out of craft beer, you can get in touch with me at martin.bridges@beerbigwig.com. I can help you with beer lists, events, tastings, or other ways to help you make better beer decisions.
Finally, if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or advertising, or you had any other suggestions or questions, drop me an email at michael@hoppiness.co.nz.
Until next time, keep your glass full and your hops fresh. Ka kite ano.